I think Mexico and Colombia are the most interesting ones to the Trump administration. Mexico makes the most sense to me because there's no fentanyl from Venezuela. It would take at least 10 refuelings for those boats to come into the US. Most of it comes from Mexico.
Where were the fighter jets? Where were the Air Force? I mean, you could have had at least one pilot get airborne.
Petro's been in the line of fire for a very long time.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a left-wing guerrilla and intellectual, and I think he's very much supportive of an anti-imperialist vision for Latin America. And Trump made a lot of threats this week.
Yes.
Threatened Greenland yesterday. Someone in the administration mentioned Canada a couple times.
And Iran.
Iran, Mexico, Colombia.
Welcome to FO Talks. With me is Joseph Bouchard. He's a journalist, he's a researcher, and a PhD student at the University of Virginia. Today we're going to talk about Venezuela. Joseph, what has the world witnessed? Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro was picked up by US Delta forces right from his residence in Venezuela's capital, Caracas. Can you tell us how the operation went down?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me back. It's great to be here. You know, it's kind of crazy. Everyone sort of, we had all mixed reactions, but I think one that was sort of universal was one of awe or shock. To maybe use a Iraq throwback term, to the level of tactical, success this was, like how quick it was, how seamless it was. We'll get into my take on it, and I personally don't agree with the strategic objectives or even the institutional and political and sort of economic reasonings for this. But I can definitely understand that this was an impressive operation. So basically, you had the CIA with Delta Force and Southcom, is my understanding, went into Caracas with very low altitude Chinooks. It flew very low enough that a local could have had an RPG and done quite a lot. But they didn't. It seems like you had precision strikes, surgical strikes. The U.S. military likes to call them, against a few facilities all over Venezuela, but mostly in Caracas, including, from my understanding, military facilities, political areas of political importance. And then basically Delta Force went into the presidential residence, took Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, killed 32 to 40 Cuban security forces, took them, put them on, I believe, a helicopter, and then the USS Iwo Jima, which had been a region for a few weeks now, a few months. And then took them to New York. Or no, wait, Guantanamo Bay, is that right? Guantanamo Bay and then New York.
Yes.
Where they're now facing trial on a few charges, but mostly relating to narco-terrorism. We can talk about that. But now you have a provisional government, an interim government, with the vice president who was in Russia, I believe, during the operation.
Yes.
And there was some speculation that she might stay there or that there was some kind of deal. But we don't really know anything. But she's assumed the presidency, and for now has the support of the Socialist Party, which she was with Maduro's party. And that's basically all we know.
Yeah, but I feel like we've jumped a few steps. Let's come back to the basics. Okay, so yes, it tactically it was a brilliant operation. I think there was absolutely no casualties on the American side. Yes,
that we know of.
Yeah, that we know of. Yes. So as of now, the reports are about 42 Cubans killed. But
yes,
some more reports are saying that there's been more deaths, and it's the death toll is at 82, including some
Yes.
Venezuelans. I think more reports are going to come in, so I don't want to comment on that. So okay, we get it that tactically this was brilliant.
Mm,
We've never seen something like this. Foreign troops coming in and capturing a president and his wife, and taking them on their military aircraft, and then of course to their country. And when I
yeah.
say we've never seen it, I mean people of our generation, the social media generation. We've never seen this. So this was the first, I would say, live action of a president being captured,
Yeah.
which was being seen on mobile phones. And you were right to say that Chinooks were flying in low, and anybody could have shot them with an RPG.
Mm,
Instead, Venezuelans were shooting them with their phones, because
yeah.
a lot of people were on the streets, and they were saying, well, they were happy, and and a lot of them were supporting the military action.
Mm,
So I want to know two things from you. A, why was the ordinary Venezuelan happy about this? At
mm.
least in the videos that we've seen on social media. And second, where was the Venezuelan military? Were they compromised? Why didn't they put up a fight? Were they controlled by someone? Were they told to stand down? What really went down?
Yeah, those are two great questions. I think a lot of us have those questions. So the first one, I think it's interesting the kinds of reactions that the media, particularly in the Western world, who is and was invested in regime change in Venezuela basically since 2014.
Hmm?
You had Chavez's death, and then immediately afterwards, the economy plummets, oil production plummets. Basically, you have a constitutional crisis, and you have a quick election where Maduro wins, and then things start going very badly, and then you have sanctions by the U.S. in 2014, and it's kind of the beginning of the end for Chavismo since then. But basically, the media's featured very positive responses mostly, including in Western countries and in Venezuela and
Hmm.
neighboring countries, from Venezuelans. Though I would challenge a bit as to the extent of the positive reaction. I think most are happy to see Maduro gone. I mean, he was a dictator and kind of a bumbling idiot, but that doesn't mean that they're happy about a U.S. coup or U.S. occupation, or maybe they're not optimistic about their options. And there is a significant chunk of the country, most of the poor and lower middle classes of the country, people in the countryside, people in the peripheries of big cities. About, let's say, 30% of the population, according to the data I've seen, around
Hmm.
30% of the population, who's very much is still ride or die Chavismo. The Chavista movement really helped their living conditions, gave them healthcare, education, literacy, housing, food baskets every week, access to vaccines and healthcare. Basically, most things that they never had access to or could never afford before. Um, and those tend to not be featured in, you could say, mainstream media or corporate media, or even public media. For
Hmm.
example, in Canada, and the CBC ran a few stories about the excitement in Venezuela and among the Venezuelan community. But that's sure maybe an economic reason, but it could also be because those areas are hard to get to. You don't really have reporters going to peripheries of Caracas or rural areas in Venezuela. Like, that's not really a thing reporters do, mostly because they're not that easy to reach out to, or even that safe. So there could be some of that, but I do think most Venezuelans uh, are happy to see Maduro go. I mean, he was a dictator, and then on the and then on the second hand, you mentioned, why didn't the army do anything? I don't know. Honestly, that was my first question. Like, for the last few months, and you could even say the last decade,
Hmm.
um, since basically that the Venezuelan government has felt pressure from the U.S. and maybe there's potential invasion, and there were a couple coup attempts, like you had the 2020 with the Green Berets, Operation Gideon, uh, working for Silver Corp, I think was the name, trying to depose Maduro and install like a mercenary government.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2019, you had the Juan Guaido appointment as de jure president of the country, and then you had sanctions, all these things. Like it's clear to me that the military and the government felt like there was threat of imminent invasion for a very long time, and were prepared for this. You had drills. Maduro was personally handing out weapons to people in Caracas and other cities, forming militias, uh, loosening gun laws, doing very explicit shows of force, and deploying all kinds of military capability in the streets and repressing the opposition and all these things. So they were ready for this, but they didn't do anything, at least that we know of, right? I mean, and as you said, this is not 1952. Like, you couldn't really hide. If there was a major clash between security forces and the Americans, you couldn't really hide it because it would be all over social media, TV, these things. Or you would at least hear about it. But we didn't. So I don't really. It's hard to tell. I mean, it seems like Maduro's security team fought back. They were killed. As you said, about 40 people.
Yeah, I want to talk more about that because
yeah.
the reports say that in the fighting, it was mostly Cubans who were killed. Was it the Cubans who were giving security to Maduro then?
Yeah, there's this whole thing about Maduro not trusting his inner circle, his security team, and trusting the Cubans more because, the Cubans, according to, well, the way it goes, I don't know if I agree with this, but they would say, well, they've done a good job basically purging all dissent and the opposition and making the military into like an ideological force, and all the people there are either completely loyal ideologically, or they're bought, or their power and their wealth and status is enough that they would never abandon the cause, which isn't the case with Chavismo. Maybe to Chavez they were loyal, but Maduro doesn't have quite the same level of charisma or cult of personality that Chavez has, and actually he's, really used a lot of the support and cult of personality and public support that Chavez had to bolster his own status, which he hasn't really been able to do himself. The last few months, last time we mentioned the social media.
Yeah.
Him doing dances in Caracas and distributing food and
singing
TikTok
songs,
dances.
singing
Yeah, exactly. So it seems like his reputation amongst the left base improved a bit, and even internationally, but that's all moot now. but definitely, so basically, yeah, there were major purges of the military in the last few years by Maduro. Mm-hmm. That included his own security team, and Cuba offered to help and send in very highly trained, committed, loyal forces. And we can talk about, Cuba has been a major ally and supporter of the Chavista regime for basically since the start. Whether that's through doctors or trade or even buying some oil from the Venezuelans. Yeah. But yeah, so that's my understanding.
Yeah, but what I was really struck by was, okay, yes, there have been purges, and Maduro did put yes men around him, especially in the military. But when you saw the videos and the kind of social media campaigning that he was doing, it was massive because he was putting out videos and visuals of air drills. So you had these Venezuelan F-16s flying. You had these Venezuelan Russian Sukhois flying.
Yeah.
And when the US launched the operation, I was I was confused because I wanted to know where is Venezuela's air force, and there is absolutely no answer to it, because not a single jet was scrambled from Venezuelan air bases. So none of these F-16s or the Sukhois even made it to the air.
That's
And
right.
it's not like the US bombed those bases either. So
No.
this is a missing puzzle in the game. And as we were talking before, I think we'll only know the complete truth in maybe 10, 20 years, and
Yeah.
not right now. But this is something that really stuck with me, as to where were the fighter jets, where were the air force. I mean, you could have had at least one pilot get airborne, but nothing like that happened.
Yeah. I wonder. I mean, it's plausible, not maybe not likely, but plausible that you know there was a what is it called? A no-fly zone
Hmm.
enforced or put on Venezuela by the United States. I want to say a couple weeks ago. It's plausible that Maduro himself said, no matter what, don't do it because they'll
They'll just
if even if I get killed or captured, if you do this, if you fight back, you will drag the Americans more into this, and we don't want that. At least if I'm gone, maybe someone else can come in, and maybe they're socialists, maybe they're from a cabinet like Delcy Rodriguez. I don't know.
mhm.
And that's a better outcome than the Americans kill me or capture me, and then there's a major fight, and then the Americans have to commit 100,000 troops, and then they take over Caracas, and they name Machado as a dictator, and these kinds of that's possible, but to put my tinfoil hat on, we don't have any information.
Mhm.
But what I've seen very popular on far left Twitter and Reddit and YouTube, especially from the Gray Zone. I don't know if you know them.
I
Uh,
don't. Do tell us.
so they're basically this far left outlet that was started by Max Blumenthal, who used to write for big publications like The Nation and Al Jazeera, and then left to found this thing. And we now know he did it with Russian money.
Hmm.
Oh, he used to work for RT. I forgot to mention that. He used to work for RT, and he used to do a lot of really interesting journalism. He, for some reason, you can speculate, always had contacts and information before everyone else. I suspect it's because Russian intelligence
Yeah.
contacts, and including in Venezuela, like in during the height of the constitutional crisis, I want to say 2017. He went to Venezuela and had a personal interview with Maduro, and he was the only Western journalist to do it. And they've really been on this for months, including Blumenthal. They've gone to Venezuela multiple times, met with Maduro, and their reporting has warned about this. And their theory is basically like Delcy Rodriguez is probably a CIA plant, and um, there were people that were flipped, and like the military was prepared and loyal and ready, but they were told by whoever was picked or bought
Hmm.
off to not do it. Um, so that's possible, and that's something like. It seems more plausible to me that they wouldn't fight back because they willingly like decided not to, rather than there was some hidden fight. And I don't know. It's hard to know, and we'll get into, I'm sure, like who's governing Venezuela, who will govern Venezuela,
Hmm.
why is Machado not in the picture? Lots of questions.
Yeah.
And for now, all we have is fun spy talk. But that's my favorite theory so far, is that you know there was a CIA uh, hybrid warfare kind of attack on the Socialist Party, and they co-opted or bought off certain people in the military, and maybe a cabinet minister, or maybe Rodriguez, and that they're running things through her rather than
I
uh,
mean, I would just say
yeah.
kudos to the CIA for pulling this off in such a unique way. But I remember the last time we spoke in December 2025.
Mm,
It was about the U.S. capturing a Venezuelan oil tanker, and I asked you whether that's legal,
mm,
and you said that, well, it depends on how you interpret it. I want to know now what's been
mm.
done with Maduro. He's been captured. He's been taken to New York. Is that legal?
Well, you could say biased party. The Americans are always going to say yes.
Mhm.
The way
Well,
they're
they have
framing
to.
it,
The
yeah, of
Americans have
course, they
to.
won't be like, well, what we're doing is illegal, but it's right. So
Yeah.
who cares? Suck it up. In their view, it's legal because it's a law enforcement operation.
Mm,
We're capturing a wanted fugitive of the U.S. Department of Justice who had a $50 million bounty on his head. Uh, we would arrest him in whatever country he is in, or even the United States. Because he violated U.S. laws by, according to them, helping traffic drugs to the United States. Um, he therefore violated American laws, and we have the jurisdiction to, to capture him, try him, do whatever. And then there's also the war on terror.
mhm.
They're not just calling him a drug cartel leader, which they are calling him that. Which, by the way, in court this morning, they basically said that that wasn't true. Which we can talk about the justification. And it seems like they're only talking about oil now, which we can
Mhm.
get into. But it's not just that he was a drug cartel leader; he's a narco-terrorist.
Right.
Um, and that basically is a wink and a nod to the Iraq War and the War on Terror and the congressional authorization to use military force in the Iraq War context and in Afghanistan. That this is an extension of that Maduro's um regime was using drugs and oil and all these things and weapons to finance and arm sanctioned terrorist groups or terrorist supporting regimes like Iran. Um, and therefore, he fits into that sanctions sort of AUMF authorization, and thus it's legal because it's U.S. law. So those are the
Right. Okay.
main two ways. I would, challenge it, but that's what they're using.
Yeah. Okay. So even if we um, take into account the Trump administration's reasoning,
Hmm.
why was the wife picked up? That's something that's been bothering me,
Good
and
point.
I'm very curious about this. Why was she picked
They're just nice people. They don't,
up?
well, take away everything, but you can have your wife. Well, that's maybe why the gray zone people come in is maybe not so crazy for once. Is that they were floating yesterday on their podcast, which I listened to. Yeah, uh, that there was a what did they call it? An exit deal, something like that.
Mhm.
Like that Maduro basically left out of his own accord, and that this was all a show, and that the only way that the Americans and Maduro could reconcile their differences or agree to an exit was if it wasn't they wouldn't take out the entire regime. They wouldn't take out the ministers. They wouldn't take out Delcy. They wouldn't take out the military. But they would, they would stage this operation and capture him using special forces and get some people, like you said, 80 casualties. So there was some military operation, and the Americans can claim victory and say, "Oh, we projected strength in our own hemisphere, and this is a show of American tactical genius." And then maybe part of the deal was to bring the wife up, but
Mm.
I don't know. It's hard to tell. But
Yeah.
that's what they say, and they seem to have privy to a lot of insider information.
Well, after Maduro was removed, U.S. President Donald Trump was quick to say that the U.S. is now in control of Venezuela.
Right.
Um, I mean, it's been 3 days now since the operation. Who's really controlling Venezuela?
Well, from what we know publicly, it's Delcy Rodriguez, the VP, um, who, interestingly enough, I believe also had sanctions on her.
Hmm.
Also had a bounty on her. I believe $25 million. But I also saw some reporting this morning that there was apparently a deal or some discussion between the intelligence community and the Trump administration, particularly Trump, that Trump and Rubio wanted to take out the entire thing and occupy and do this whole spectacle. Um, but the intelligence community, particularly the CIA, wanted to basically govern by proxy. And
Hmm.
sure, you take out Maduro because he's in the way and he doesn't want to leave. He's unwilling to cooperate. The Biden administration tried to do sanctions relief for democratic promises and do a fair election, and that didn't work. He's obviously paranoid and unwilling to collaborate in any way with the Americans. I would disagree with that, but that's maybe their assessment. And thus, if we take him out and then leave the rest, it's fine because the rest of the administration maybe is more competent, more willing to collaborate. And once we show them that we're actually willing and capable of taking out Maduro and doing so very precisely, and we've had all this military buildup and we've done these strikes that basically show that we mean business, then maybe they'll be more willing to come to the table if we leave them in place. And Trump basically said something to that effect. This was it yesterday or this morning that that she's president, but we'll get her to do whatever we want. And if she doesn't, then she'll face something perhaps even worse than Maduro.
Hmm.
So it seems like that's the option they're taking, at least publicly, that they're going to leave the rest of the government intact, but have them do the bidding of American Oil Corporation.
Right.
Basically, like modernize the oil infrastructure, get American companies in there. Right now, there's only Chevron getting about 100,000 barrels a day, which is basically nothing. We'll get them in, we'll modernize everything, and then we'll export the oil, and we'll cut off the supply to China, which gets about 80% of the exports, 10% to Chevron, and 10% to the Cubans. And we'll also cut off all partnerships with Russia and Iran, and that'll be it. But then I don't know if there's something else going on. I don't know. It's a bit fishy to me, but I'd be curious to hear your take.
Right. But I want to know what's going to happen with Maria Corina Machado. Where is she in the
Hmm.
picture? She. The last I know is she was in Norway, and
Yeah,
she's still there. Um, is she going to be coming back to Venezuela? Does she plan on coming back? Because we all know that she was in touch with the Trump administration, especially after winning the Nobel Peace Prize. But she's been awfully quiet, apart from the fact that she was celebrating that Maduro was gone. She
sure.
hasn't been open about her political ambitions going forward.
No, that's right. I mean, all she said is basically congratulating Trump, and it seems like she's basically trying to not, uh, you know, to not poke the bear.
Hmm.
That if she's as nice as possible to Trump, then maybe she'll come back into his good graces, and maybe he'll change his mind about Rodriguez governing, and he'll appoint her. Um, she said like an hour ago that she would share her Nobel Peace Prize with Trump. Um, and I believe that's because there's this whole theory floating around that the reason why Trump is mad with her, and I'll give some context actually. Yesterday at the press conference, someone asked Trump, "What's happening with Machado? Why isn't she governing? Do you think she'll be the president?" And he said, he basically said, "Delcy Rodriguez is the president. Um, Machado's a good woman, but she doesn't have the respect of her people and of her country." Which to me is like sidelining. At
Mhm.
least it seems. Some people were saying, oh, maybe he mixed up the two, but it seems like that's not the case. Um, so, and some people were saying the reason why he did that to Machado is because she won the Nobel Peace Prize and out of spite. So, it's not the dumbest theory. Trump is a spiteful man. He does play personal politics, which we talked about last time.
Yeah.
That could be a theory, and now she's trying to basically have him favor her again. But I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
She-
Well, Maduro was actually the one who learned it the hard way about Trump's spiteful politics.
that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, because he was, adversarial in public and then friendly in private. Was
Yes.
basically the way
Yes.
it was working. He switched up the last minute with the yes peace, no war thing, but it seems like that wasn't enough. And then maybe the CIA thought, well, she's too controversial. She's too on the nose. Like if we put her in, like it's obvious that this is a coup and we're doing it for oil because like 2 weeks ago she was on Donald Trump Jr.'s podcast saying we have $1
She was
trillion
in sabotage
of
oil.
oil.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and like you guys can come in and depose Maduro and put me in, and then she leaked this plan to the New York Times. What was it called? The first hour, the 10th hour, 100th hour, and 1,000-hour plan or something like that. Basically, like this very well concocted plan of how I'll run the country, and maybe that was just too public for the CIA and whoever is in charge of this operation. That
Mhm.
we have to at least have it get some credibility, and not piss off the Chavistas too much. Maybe not provoke a military response from neighboring countries like Brazil, for example, and not provoke a response from Western or even NATO countries. Like basically, what's also interesting is that all the Western countries have supported this, either tacitly or directly.
Or
You had
unwillingly.
or on well, yeah, sure, we could
Yeah.
say that. Maybe in private they're groveling about it, but you have Macron basically, who was friendly with Maduro. He was the first Western leader after 2014 to come back to doing diplomacy with Maduro. Met him at, I believe, the G7 or the BRICS or one of those summits. And now he was saying yesterday or 2 days ago that this is fantastic and screw Maduro and he's a dictator and we welcome freedom. Mark Carney, my prime minister, basically said the same thing.
Mhm.
So it's been interesting. But yeah, let's talk about.
Yeah, but let's talk more about that. Let's talk about the reactions because yes, you've given us Macron's version. You've told us how Macron was reacting. I want to talk about Gustavo Petro, Colombian
Mm,
president. He's not taken this well. He's in fact doubled down and threatened Donald Trump and actually challenged him, saying that I'm right
yes.
here, come and get me.
Yeah. That's right. I would say it's understandable and predictable. Petro's been in the line of fire for a very long time.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a left-wing guerrilla and intellectual, and I think he's very much supportive of an anti-imperialist vision for Latin America, and even maybe even left-wing nationalist vision for Colombia. The last few months, you had a falling out between Petro and Trump because Petro called Trump all sorts of names, called him a pedophile, called him a war criminal, an imperialist, a dictator, all these things.
And then he had his visa revoked.
Yeah, well, that was, I believe, with the UN
For
speech,
the
and he basically
UNGA.
called out Trump directly, and then he went to a pro-Palestinian protest, had his visa revoked. I believe was deported.
Hmm.
Is that right? Or at least self-deported.
Yeah,
Um,
the media reported it as self-deportation. But
okay, there you
yeah,
go.
yeah,
And the U.S. Stopped all funding or assistance to Colombia, which is it's not peanuts. It's billions of dollars a year in security assistance, mostly, and also democratic assistance, which was mostly through USAID, but I think now State Department and DoD, and cut all like drug anti-narcotic cooperation um, with Colombia. the Petro administration, their approach is mostly like try to maybe work towards legalization and then do peace pacts with the left wing guerrillas and the cartels, and have a total war with the far right paramilitaries that were favored by past right wing administrations and even the U.S. government for
Hmm.
2 or 3 decades. So that this isn't new. The Petro and Trump don't like each other. They've traded insults for a long time, a few months now. And even before this, Petro was hinting at forming a Gran Colombia, a Greater Colombia, with Ecuador, Venezuela, and Panama. Although he said Panama maybe he's long gone because they're imperialists now because they've dollarized and all these things. We need to form a bloc in Latin America against the imperialists, and they want the oil, they want our women, like he said. They want all these things, and we cannot let them do that. And there was even reporting by New York Times that Trump wanted to invade through Colombia, and that Petro refused that. And I think, Petro's made that very clear that he would not tolerate any kind of military operation against Colombia or through Colombia. And his reaction has been to completely condemn it and to call for other Latin American leaders to do the same and to unite as a region. And calling for a release of Maduro and sorting this out democratically. He said, "I'm not a fan of Maduro. I had my problems with the last election, like everyone else, but this is unfair. It's completely illegal, and
Hmm.
it's for oil and all the wrong reasons."
Yeah. And then let's talk about Cuba as well, because Cuba has not taken this well. And of course, Cubans were killed in the operation that
Right.
the Americans carried out. And after that, Marco Rubio and Donald Trump have both said that Cuba's next. Well, and they've said it directly and indirectly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But is that going to be the case? I mean, why Cuba?
Hmm. Well, it's hard to know because Rubio hasn't made this a secret. His family were refugees from Cuba or exiles in Florida. I believe though during the Batista regime, which that's interesting. But they say, he says in his book that it's because of the socialist government who in 1959. Is that right? Do you know the date?
I'm not sure,
The
but I can just look it up.
Okay, it's fine. It doesn't matter. Yeah, very long ago. And Rubio's, carried this chip on his shoulder that he would one day see freedom and democracy in Cuba, and it would be a pro-American bastion again. Uh, and that Cuba is very close to the United States. You could take a boat, like a
Hmm.
motorboat, and get to Miami. um, and he's, as a senator, was very vocal against Cuba and wanted to support regime change very directly, and supported even U.S. funding to that effect. But now, you have Trump as well, which that's new. We didn't know that, but it's perhaps that Rubio and maybe CIA convinced them.
Hmm.
Hard to know. But they both said basically that Havana has a lot of problems, and we would like to see a different regime. And they're behind a lot of this. They're behind Maduro. They're behind the Chavista government. They propped them up for years, and we're behind the security team, the oil exports, and sent doctors and teachers, and uh, basically trained a lot of the bureaucracy and all these things. And we want to see that change. I don't know. I mean, Trump made a lot of threats this week. Uh,
Yes,
threatened Greenland yesterday. Someone in the administration mentioned Canada a couple times.
and
Uh,
Iran,
Iran,
and
Mexico, Colombia. It's hard to know which ones or if any of them are credible. I would take them seriously if I were Cuba because
Mhm.
I don't think Marco Rubio is playing around, and he definitely feels emboldened after this. And given the lack of chaos and violence, he probably thinks, well, I could do this in Cuba and, you know, redeem the United States for Bay of Pigs and make my family heritage proud or something. I don't know. And do it without any kind of long term or even short term violence or consequences and basically like take over Cuba and have it run like a pro-US regime like in the Batista days, and it would be fine.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to Venezuela, we did have some inclination that something like this could happen. There were indications that Maduro would be targeted, he would be taken out. And it was all written in the Trump administration's national security strategy, which came out in November when they spoke about the Western Hemisphere.
That's right.
And many analysts say that, well, this was in practice because when you look at the elections that happened last year, multiple governments in South America turned right. You had Bolivia turn right. You had,
Right.
of course, in Argentina, Javier Milei came back with a landslide and won the midterm. And you had Chile turning right.
Yep.
You've got Peru.
Yeah.
Not exactly turning right, but
Well, the president is right wing, but it's hard to know. What's happening.
But Dina Boluarte is out. She's out.
Yes,
she's pro China. She's gone.
Right.
So that just leaves, and now Maduro is gone.
Right.
That leaves us with Brazil, Cuba, Nicaragua, and possibly Panama. But as you say, Panama is also towing the Trump administration's line. So
yeah, they have a center right to right wing government.
Yeah. So is this going to be the norm in the next? I would say. I mean, and during this Trump presidency, where they're going to be focused on getting all right-wing or at least pro-American governments in Colombia, Cuba, and Brazil.
Yeah, that seems to be the goal.
Yeah.
And you could even say it goes back to the first administration when you had the U.S. medal. Its elections, most prominently in Bolivia in 2019, they after Evo Morales, we now know, won the election. In 2019, you had Janine Áñez take over as the president pro tempore, and she stayed for about a year. And in the meantime, opened up commercial and diplomatic relations to the United States, privatized the lithium process, basically opened up to American businesses, resumed diplomatic relations with Israel, cut off relations with Iran, and I believe China and Russia as well. And target the left. Like I think that's the kind of model that Trump 2.0 is looking to do, perhaps even more aggressively, like we're seeing now, where in the past it could have just been, we'll sponsor or fund or co-opt whatever journalists and think tank people and commentators and politicians, and then indirectly through them have our interests served. But in this case, you have the U.S. just directly with the military taking out the leader doesn't want, and either letting a leader they think they want, or perhaps later we'll see Machado come in. So that would mean directly putting in who they want to do their business. So I would say so, and they haven't hidden their discontent at Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil. I mean, they've basically called all three of them narcos and terrorists and communists, and they were. Was it yesterday? Trump called Sheinbaum. She said that she doesn't run that country. The cartels run that country. She's embedded with the cartels. Yeah, it's like very aggressive language. And it seems like all the Republican politicians support, except maybe like Thomas Massey, support at least strikes in Mexico, maybe even a full coup or invasion. I think it was Ron DeSantis floating drone strikes a year ago. So they're definitely not, they're not joking around. I think they're doing this. They're not doing it for shits and giggles, as I saw another commentator say. Like, when they make these threats, they should be taken seriously, especially because there is precedent to them. It's not the first time the U.S. does this. I mean, they've fought the drug war since the Nixon administration, where, including in Mexico and Colombia and Brazil, they've propped up violent armed groups and governments to fight the drug war. So I would take it seriously, and Trump is a pretty aggressive president. So,
Okay, so who do you think is next? Which country?
I think Mexico and Colombia are the most interesting ones to the Trump administration. Mexico makes the most sense to me because Sheinbaum has expressed some interest in collaborating, at least on policy. So it wouldn't be taken as negatively, and you wouldn't have as much pushback. And there is already a lot of infrastructure to sort of host Americans to do joint operations, which have been happening for a very long time. And I don't think there is as much ideological conflict. I think Sheinbaum is more pragmatic than Petro. Like, I think if the U.S. did this in Colombia, there would be absolutely no room for cooperation. And it would basically make Petro and his government double down, triple down, maybe even respond militarily to the Americans, and I think hand them the next election. Whereas in Mexico, I mean, you could also say, in Mexico, it's more contested politically. It's not as contested politically, excuse me. The Morena party won in a landslide last time, and they're extremely popular. I don't see the PAN or the PRI or any other party making a contest on this. Like, in Colombia, you're talking about razor-thin margins. And if you're handing the left a victory, which the election is next year, or this year, and the candidate that the left is running is basically Petro, but even more radical. If you could, he's an activist, environmentalist, a lawyer. He was also a very left-wing senator, and has supported all of Petro's positions, including on drugs. So, this could basically hand him the election. You wouldn't have this problem in Mexico. So I think Mexico makes the most sense. You also had U.S. interventions in Mexico more recently than in Colombia. The Peña Nieto administration. So I would say that makes the most sense to me.
Right. Joseph, I want to end on Venezuela. And before we do that, I just want to give a quick roundup of how the events perspired. So 2024, Maduro wins an election, and it's heavily contested. And his win is not recognized internationally. In fact, even countries in Latin America and South America don't agree with the results, including Brazil.
Yes.
And then you get Donald Trump coming into office, and he says that Maduro is an illegitimate president. And of course, the winner is Edmundo Gonzalez, who was in exile in Spain by then. And then you got Marco Rubio coming in, and he starts beating the war drums, but it's only against the drug cartels and primarily Tren de Aragua.
That's right.
And illegal immigration coming from Venezuela. So it starts off with these two, which is crackdown on drugs and crackdown on illegal immigrants. And there have been deportations to Venezuela.
The mental asylums, all that stuff.
and that's when the airstrikes begin. First, it is on tiny boats, and they say that these are affiliated and linked to the cartels. Yeah. And after that, we
don't know which one, but yes.
Yeah. Which one? Sometimes they say it's Tren de Aragua. Sometimes they say it's the cartel, the other cartel that they keep blaming, which they say that Maduro is. Yeah. And then from there, we go on to an oil tanker being seized, and then now Maduro being taken out, to now absolutely no discussion on drugs and illegal immigrants, but only
except JD Vance tweeted once about it.
But now it's only about two things: oil and gold.
Yes.
So was this really about drugs and immigration, or was this really about oil and gold?
I think the immigration point, makes sense politically. Same with the drugs point, but I think on policy they do not care. I think it was a convenient legal justification. maybe even political justification. But every analyst I've looked at who's serious basically says there's no fentanyl from Venezuela. It would take at least 10 refuelings for those boats to come into the U.S. Most of it comes from Mexico, which you're not interested in fighting, at least for now, and from China.
Mhm.
And then if it's cocaine, like 10% of it comes from Venezuela. Most of it is, again, from Mexico and Colombia. So this is a moot point. And even if it is drugs, like, are we supposed to just kill drug traffickers? Is that the way it goes now? Like, are we going to kill, like, I'm making this point in an article I wrote. Like, should we expect pharmaceutical CEOs to be drone strike next? Like, what's happening? So you have that, and then on the immigration point, there are a lot of Venezuelans in the U.S., but the administration was definitely exaggerating the crime point and selecting very specific stories of immigrants, oftentimes who were not Venezuelans, but then like linking them together and saying, "Oh, Maduro is sending us these criminals from all over the world, from prisons, from mental institutions, into our country, and they're committing crimes or raping our women, or killing us, and we need to stop it." So I think convenient,
Mm.
and I think revealingly all they've been talking about is oil and natural resources and China, and I think we should believe them because that one makes the most sense. I mean, my I understand that the stock market did pretty well as a result of it.
Mhm.
Exxon and Chevron and ConocoPhillips, their stock went up 5% since this, and people made a lot of money. There was apparently also a few people who bet on Poly Market and betting apps that this would happen and made a lot of money. Like I think this is about money. It's pretty
Mhm.
clear, and getting China out
Right.
of Latin America and this retaking control of our hemisphere. Seems like that's pretty clearly what they're going with now. Seems like that makes the most sense.
Right. Well, now that you brought up China, and this is something I wanted to ask you before, um, is this it for China in Venezuela? I mean, because this is a really big blow to the
Mm.
Chinese government, because a lot of their oil was coming from Venezuela, and well, now they've been completely shut out. Um,
Yeah.
and they've lost a major ally, and they've been losing allies in the region after Dina Boluarte, I should say. How are they reading this? How is Beijing seeing what's gone down in
Mm.
Caracas?
Well, it seems like they might be shifting to Mexico and Colombia and Brazil, all three of which have significant oil reserves. And we're already looking into doing free trade agreements with China. I believe Colombia just signed it and just joined the Belt and Road Initiative,
Yes.
and exporting oil to China. So it seems like that will be the option. Uh, but then the Trump administration floated the idea of sanctioning countries who export oil to China and Russia, which that's the case for these countries. But it's hard to know because like Trump is friendly with China on some days and then not on others. Like it seems like there's a constant battle between the hawks and the doves,
Hmm.
or like the pro-China and anti-China. Like the tech billionaires are pro-China, and then it's hard to like. This is kind of an incoherent policy debate, but if the stance is we oppose China in our hemisphere, then China would probably uh, have to think for a long time about whether it wants to take that option of increasing imports from Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil,
Hmm.
and maybe looking to Asia, closer to its backyard, or maybe developing its own capacity. Which it seems like that wouldn't be implausible that Russia, China, Iran basically say, well, if you're asserting influence on your hemisphere and drawing back from Europe and the Middle East and expressing no interest in defending Taiwan, then we will assert our dominance over our own respective regions.
Hmm.
And basically, you stay out of ours and we stay out of yours, and we'll just leave it at that for now. Yeah. So
Right.
basically, a multipolar world is what
Hmm.
this is creating.
Great. On that note, Joseph, thank you very much for speaking to Fair Observer and for sharing these lovely insights, even though
Thank
you
you.
and I both agree that there's a lot more to dig and there's a lot more to uncover. And
Yes.
I'll have to call you back again once we get more details, and we can do a much deeper dive into what's happening with Maduro, because of course he's now been put on trial and more things are going to come out. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.